Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Yacovelli, owner and principal of TopDog Learning Group, and also known as the Gay Leadership Dude. Today, we're going to talk about three really awesome things. The first is looking at how unconscious bias can get in the way of your own leadership success, thinking about resiliency and what that means to you and your work team and those within the workplace in order to be more successful, and really thinking about the challenge that during post-COVID, your rockstar employees, LGBTQ or otherwise, may have the freedom to leave if your workplace isn't as inclusive. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, he's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of Leadership Excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, how about becoming truly inclusive as a leader? But what does that mean? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who maybe you completely disagree with? This is exactly what your heart, your mind, your soul has been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some very real and often intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. We're talking about astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, Grammy award-winning entertainers, movie producers. I mean, some people you might think you'd completely disagree with, who you will find truly fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com and find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find both of our shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into radio, wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant. So please do us a big favor. Go over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us on Google Home or Alexa. Just say play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Diversity and inclusion are very hot subjects, and most of us know we need to pay attention to that. However, most people don't know where the lines are. So they often shut up, shut down, and that's on both sides of the equation, often living in fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. How can we understand how to navigate inclusion in a way that is genuinely inclusive, productive, respectful, and safe for all? Well, that's what we're going to find out on today's show. Are you ready? Our guest today is Dr. Steve Yacovelli, not Machiavelli, Yacovelli. He is a highly in-demand diversity and inclusion change management and leadership expert. His consulting firm, TopDog Learning Group, works with both Fortune 500s and not-for-profit organizations to bring about more inclusion and effective workplace. With over 25 years of experience in leadership, strategy, and organizational learning and communication, Dr. Steve is a rare breed of professional that understands the power of academic theory and applying it into a corporate setting to achieve business results. He's worked with Fortune 500s like the Walt Disney Company, Bayer, American Library Association, and large universities such as the Ohio State University and the University of Central Florida. He's an award-winning author of Pride Leadership, Strategies for the LGBTQ plus leader to be the king or queen of their jungle. He's a speaker, a catalyst, And Steve has a not so hidden agenda to make the world a more inclusive place for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the man dubbed as the gay leadership dude, Dr. Steve Yacovelli.
I love your intros, Doug. They're so awesome.
Thanks, mate. Welcome to the WWF of Inclusion.
Exactly. I love it.
So let's jump right into it. In the context of diversity and inclusion, you know, as I said, it's a hot subject.
Yep.
What is the question that we should be looking for answers to, but we're often not? You know, because I feel like a lot of it is just rhetoric and it's blah, blah, blah. So what's the questions we really need to be answering?
So what you're seeing smart businesses do is, yeah, they have the diversity and inclusion stuff, and that's fantastic. Diversity is the similarities and differences in people, especially within the workplace. Inclusion is having them be active parts, but the smart companies, smart leaders are saying, you know what, this is all great, but what's the sense of belonging that my employees and my team members have? And so what it does is it flips the script, and it's not what we as a company are doing, it's more about the efforts and the feelings that happen with those within the workplace. So really fostering that sense of belonging is key.
So we should be asking the question, how can we make sure that everybody feels like they belong, they're part of this?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
But, you know, you and I had this discussion before. The challenge with that is everybody has unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Me, you, everybody has unconscious bias. We have to confront that unconscious bias. We don't know, in other words, we don't know that we're biased about something we're biased about. We want to feel part of something. That's part of the human condition. And at the same time, just to give everybody some sort of context on this, we've probably all heard of the, you know, now we're talking more about neuroscience, which is lovely and wonderful. And most of us are familiar with this hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's the part of us that happens when we bond with people. But it is also the hormone that allows us to other. It allows us to create genocide and do all kinds of shitty things. So we want to create inclusion, but we also want to be included in our group. And that for me is the greatest problem with inclusion, is that we are tribal by nature.
Yep.
We want to be included in the LGBT community, but we want to exclude these other people. And so every time we get this inclusion, it seems to catalyze the exclusion. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's where, yeah, we do fight our own internal wiring. You're right.
Yeah.
And we are tribal by nature, of course, because of safety and our little cave brains and all that fun stuff. But what we have to do and is you hit the first spot. And I actually, in a lot of my conversations and a lot of my keynotes and all that good stuff, talk about how to be a consciously inclusive leader and kind of fight some of those things you just talked about. And it starts with thinking in. So that's about yourself and really diving deep internally to think about, well, what are those potential unconscious biases that I may have that could be helping me create some of those otherness in folks. And then once you kind of get some of that down, then you look at that immediate circle. So you speak up, and that's the people around you. How can we make them feel included? How can we mitigate those some of that non-inclusive language that tends to happen in the workplace? And then how do we act out, which is kind of the broader organization. And so it's kind of a 3-step process to beat some of that wiring and also to think about holding ourselves accountable. And you had a great conversation a couple of podcasts ago about empathy. How can we embrace that empathetic leader within us in order to foster that sense of inclusion for all of those folks around us?
So give us a clue, help us out here, because I feel like, you know, all my life I've been surrounded by people who are every kind of mixed race and sexual orientation.
Sure.
I feel blessed by that, because that bias was not there with me.
Sure.
Simply because I grew up in it, right? I mean, I grew up around, my mom had gay mates, my dad had gay mates. You know, we had black, Chinese, brown. I mean, you know, everybody and everything. Yeah. And I feel very blessed by that. But it's interesting because, and I had this conversation with somebody of another race, and we were talking about the fact that when I was a kid, where I grew up, we used racial slurs with each other without any malice,
Sure.
right? We used gay
Absolutely.
references without any malice.
Yep.
And I think that the part of the problem with inclusion is this, or seems to be, is this sense of malice that isn't there oftentimes. And so people become fearful on the other side. So when some gay people talk about the straight people who are like, I want to be inclusive, but I'm really afraid of saying the wrong shit.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that people will freak out.
Yeah.
So help us out with that.
Well, and allyship is an interesting conversation, and of course, as the gay leadership dude, we have a lot of those conversations with the folks I work with. But I think if you look at trying to be an ally for any of the other groups, whether that be the queer group or women or whatever, the first thing is asking the right questions to that trusted member of the group, and then paraphrasing Stephen Covey, listening to understand, not listening to respond, and just being quiet. And then couple that with on the opposite side, and I just had this conversation with a client yesterday. People who are want to be good allies often rely on the other to teach them or to educate them. And for us others, that gets really exhausting after a while. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had about pronouns and why it's so important within the workplace. And so, the thing that's really awesome about living in this day and age is Google is really cool. And you can do some Googling first as someone who wants to be an ally, do that. And then, yes, absolutely engage those folks who are part of that other community to say, look, I've been in the space for 25 plus years. And last summer, I just dove as deep as I could to really understand my brothers and sisters of color. And, I thought I did as this white cisgender gay dude. Obviously, I didn't. And nor will I ever get 100% there. But I've just grabbed and ate all these books as much as I could. And then had some of those more deeper conversations with my Black and brown brothers and sisters to be like, okay, this is what I read. Tell me your experience here. And I think we all can do that, do a little bit of the legwork, and then have those meaningful conversations.
So it's interesting because in many ways we're always like, oh, Jesus, you went and Googled this, didn't you? It's like the eye roll is like, oh, you Googled it, didn't you? You've got some crazy ass idea, but you're actually telling people to go Google.
Well, also look at your source.
From a sense of not being lazy, though.
Yeah, exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And I think that what's important is to, and again, you can correct me absolutely, but I think what's important is to say, I'm fumbling here.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to put my foot in my mouth.
Oh, sure.
I'm fumbling here. My mates and I, when we grew up with kids, we called each other fags, right? That wasn't an insult. It wasn't even bullying.
Well,
no. For us as straight guys with each other, it wasn't an insult. But but there were other guys who could call us that, and it was definitely an insult.
Right.
So again, this context is the thing I'm always concerned about with inclusion. Is where is I think there's a bigger conversation around context that often gets missed, and it becomes the broad strokes, and it's really unfortunate.
I would say it's context, but it's also that sense of, this good leadership is having trust, and it's really having that trust that you can go to somebody and I can say, Dove, you know what? Don't say that, or more importantly, when you say that, this is the perception, it could be for someone in XYZ community.
Absolutely.
And then that's okay. And that's when I work with clients, we are often trying to say, let's take a step back. What's your culture of feedback like? Oh, we're feedback rich. Okay, tell me more about that. And often it's like, well, we have this model. Yeah, exactly. Like, we have this model. We teach everybody. I'm like, okay, but is it used? And so that's really where great allyship can come back into, and getting to that comfort level is having that comfort with the people within the workplace to say, you know what, hey, coworker, when you said this, here's the impact it had on me, and having that courage to have that conversation, that dialogue is the best way to really open things up to be more inclusive.
And I like this because one of the things that I think is important is to understand, again, empathy and compassion is not a one-sided thing. No. So you as the straight guy can try to be a better ally and have greater levels of empathy and compassion for your, anybody who's diverse in any way, shape, or form inside of your organization. But if you, as you listen to this, maybe you are on that other side, and it's important for you to have empathy and compassion for the person on the other side who's struggling, who actually wants to be an ally, but doesn't know, doesn't even know that this is not okay. Because I know there are things I can say to my friends that I wouldn't say in business.
Of course.
That I wouldn't say to somebody I don't really know. And by that, I mean, as in, I'm comedic and I'm playful, and, I know it's hard to believe. But, so I'll say these things, right? Right. My mate John comes over. He's gay. He's in a gay relationship, has been for a long, long time. He's a bear, he's a big guy with a big beard, and he's right. Lovely. I love John to bits. And he comes in, the first thing I do is I grab his ass and I go, "Yep, still got it, mate." Right. Right. At the same time,
don't do that at work.
No, but at the same time, right? I would never do that in a work environment. I would never do that with somebody I don't know. And I also do it with my female friends.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But again, that would be sexual harassment in a normal situation.
Sure.
So one of the things that this is why I wanted to have you on, Steve, because I think this is one of our greatest challenges. We don't take into consideration context. We don't take into consideration not only context of environment, but context of trust. Mm-hmm. Right? Where is the context of trust? And so is inclusion, tell us where to start with that? Because I think that's where people get confused. They're like, well, I'm not biased against gays. I've got gay friends. And then they say shit like I just did, like fag. And then it's like, oh my God, that's terrible. And you don't know, not because you're ignorant and not because you're mean, but because it is okay in a certain context. Can you help us sort of navigate that?
Yeah. So when you think about the concept of being inclusion, it's not a this or that. And there's it's called the Bennett scale. Looks at the different ways that we as allies and we as humans can really think about going into a space to be more inclusive. And so, like on one side of the spectrum, it's things like, I don't care. I'm empathetic. I don't give a rat's whatever about that particular community. And then on the absolute other side of the conversation is looking at, well, what can I do to foster inclusivity for all of those others within the group? And so it's not so black and white. It's very very continual. Where on kind of it's 6 stages. That's right, 6 stages in the Bennett scale. And the first 3 areas are what's called ethnocentric stages. And so it's like denial, defense, and minimalization. Of the other group, and insert whichever others are here. Yep. And then there's kind of that line where people kind of get some awakening and have that understanding, and then they get to things like, okay, it's acceptance. So now we're on the ethno-relative stages. Okay, acceptance. I'm there. Okay, I get it. There's gay people. They exist. Okay, that's cool. But then adaptation they exist.
Oh
okay, now
God,
we know
they didn't even exist before.
Right. Oh my gosh, no, they're there.
I am the Prime Minister of Iran. There's no gay people in Iran.
They
don't exist.
Insert other countries here as well.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. So we have no gays in our country. And then adoption is where you have that much more empathy for that particular culture or those others. And then integration is really true allyship, where it's like, great, I'm going to do everything I can. Maybe I'm going to be in an ally group. I'm going to join the queer group, or I'm going to start a queer group. If I'm an executive, I'm going to sponsor the queer group. So it's not so black and white. But what I strive to do in the workplace is to get people just over kind of that line where it goes from that minimalization, where they're just like, all right, I get it, they exist, that's cool, to more like, okay, they do exist, and I'm really starting to understand the value that difference can bring to the table, and especially in the workplace. I mean, looking at the business case for being inclusive is massive, and the data doesn't lie,
because that's really important. Because one of the things that I talk about in my work that I think is vitally important and is missed when we talk about diversity. I'll give you a quick example. I talked about it on a recent show too. One of my clients, he's brown, Middle Eastern guy, climbing the corporate ladder very fast. and he's climbing the corporate ladder because he is actually incredibly bright. He's a wonderful human being, and he's very bright. But he also came in and we were talking, and he goes, I also know I'm moving up the ladder faster than I should because I'm brown. Right. And he said, and I don't like that. He goes, I don't mind getting there of my own, but I don't like that. And I said, so is it some sort of inclusion thing? And he said, yeah, it is. It's a diversity inclusion thing. And I said, okay, but here's the question. Can you say anything that's not white? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, is there cognitive diversity? Do they recognize the value of that you can bring culturally from your heritage into the environment? And so that's why I wanted to come back on that with what you were just saying there, because cognitive diversity is so valuable. Right. And so when we start looking at gay people as a sexual thing, as opposed to a cognitive diversity, which is you see the world through different lenses. And I'm fascinated about how we can apply that, learn that, grow that in our business. This can be very powerful. So you were talking about the value of it in business. Talk to us a bit more.
About. So I do want to first start with how I define diversity, and
thank you.
And one of the things that, and I actually know these two women, Garden Schwartz and Rowe, fantastic women leaders in the D&I space early on, and they said, you know what, the definition of diversity is well beyond the whole race and gender and sexual orientation thing. So they kind of bundled it into what they call the 5 layers of diversity, and in the very core is what you're talking about is personality. Different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching the world, and we humans are all 5 layers. And so what's beautiful is, there will never be another shiny unicorn like Dove or Steve or whomever, because of our personality. Even twins are, of course, are different. So that's what makes you, you. And then the next layer out is the one that most people are familiar with when they think diversity. And that's what they call internal dimension. So it's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, gender identity. And so for the most part, these don't change over the course of your life. Obviously your age changes, but I can't say I'm now not going to be 50 years old. Woohoo! You can't do that. A physical ability.
Really?
I wish I could do that. No, I like being 50. 50's fun. I like it. So, but physical ability, of course, that will maybe modify as you old. But this is when I start to work with organizations who want to be more inclusive. I'm like, so tell me, what efforts do you have? They're like, oh, of course we're inclusive. We have blank month. I'm like, okay, that's a good start, but that's not really super there. But then Garden Schwartz and Rowe talk about external dimensions, and these are the things that still contribute to your diversity and how you look at the world, but they're things that change sometimes daily. So it's things like your income, your personal habits, your religion, your appearance, recreational habits, religion, marital status, parental status. They all impact how you look at the world and the different lens that you bring to the table. You bring a bunch of parents together, they have a very different world and perspective than those of us who are just canine parents, for example, pointing to myself. But it's still part of your diverse makeup. And then they talk about organizational dimensions. And these are in the context, of course, of whichever group you're part of. So in a work context, it could be things like my functional level, my union affiliation, where I'm at in the food chain of the business. I started adding legacy organization because I work with so many larger companies, and those M&As, mergers, acquisitions happen, and people still bring their wonderful baggage from the previous group to the new group. But those all also impact kind of how you look at the world through the organizational dimensions. And then I think it's about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, so they added country of operation. And I thought this was a really cool, so you talked about context earlier. This was, country of operation, how that impacts how you're looking at the world. So, I'm living here in the States, and our laws, economy, language, it could be very different than, I have a lot of German multinational clients for some reason, so I'm getting to know the German culture better. So those ideals are very different. And so that all permeates down into who you are as a human. And I love this definition of diversity because, to your friend's point, yes, race and ethnicity, those internal dimensions, massively important in our world, but they are also one facet. And it's not to say that, oh, great, so just get rid of all your people of color and say, let's have introverts and extroverts. That's personality diversity. Yes. And all of these facets need to be thought through in order to make sure that we as a business are doing the right things to have the most inclusive environment that we can.
But again, I love all those outlines. It's great. But again, it's where I said in the intro, for a lot of leaders, outside of, I'm not talking about just at a corporate policy, but at a personal level, it can feel like freaking overwhelming.
Sure.
Right? How do I confront this? And again, that eggshell mentality. Am I walking around on eggshells and hear this thing about microaggressions and you looked at me sideways. Am I not allowed to look anymore? And again, that fear thing. So just help us to understand how to deal with that sense of overwhelm. Here's more shit I got to deal with. My God.
Yeah. I think, it starts with the leader's intentions, that executive's intentions being well known. Like if your heart's in the right place, one, you let people know that, and people will guide you. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And just so you have to kind of almost make yourself a little bit vulnerable if you're in that space to
No,
say,
I don't think you have to make yourself a little bit. I think you
well,
absolutely
a lot
have
of
to
it.
make yourself vulnerable. You have to be willing to step up
Yeah.
and go, listen, I don't know how to navigate this, and I may be the leader, but I'm not the leader of this.
Absolutely.
Could you help me?
And I love working with executives who have that humility and that self-awareness to say, you know what, hey team, I need you to guide me here. And also, but again, it's yes, take that guidance from the folks around you, especially the people of the other community, but also do the work yourself and maybe have those executive coaching or meet with your HR executive or someone who you can close the door and be like, okay, here's what I think I messed up, help me. And really just putting it out there on the table, which is smart leaders are fantastic to do that, because then they start to learn and grow. And also the team members, they're going to start to trust you even more if you say, look, it's LGBT Pride Month. I want to do the right thing. What do you think are the right things I should do? I've researched it and it should be this, Y, Z, but what do you think? And so you're just showing that you're trying to make an effort. I get really, really frustrated with the workplaces and the clients who just rainbow wash everything for June. I'm seeing every logo I can on LinkedIn. And so then I like to have the conversation in November. So what are you still doing to support the LGBTQ+ community? And did the same thing
rainbow
last
in
year.
June.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, October at least is National Coming Out Day, so we can maybe throw it. Oh no, but it's cancer awareness, and so everything's pink now. And yeah, it's so you can start to understand who's doing it for the looks of it versus the intent of it.
Yeah, it's a challenging idea because like you said, people will wash something in order to appear and they miss the point. And we need to do way better on that generally. I'm not talking about gay, I'm not talking about straight, I'm talking about just generally. And I want to walk through more of your sort of understanding of this, and particularly addressing the unconscious bias that is in there, and how to shape the organizational culture in a way that really brings it forward, and how to have resilience on both sides of this.
Yep.
So if you're the person who doesn't know how to do it and you put your foot in your mouth, how to have resilience to come back and do it again. Absolutely. And if you're the gay person who got some commentary that was maybe not malicious but was hurtful, how to have resilience for that too. So we're going to come back in part 2 with that. We're here, of course, with our fabulous guest, Dr. Steve, and Steve is going to be with us as we come back. He is also known as the gay leadership dude. He's great new book is called Pride Leadership, and you can certainly find that on Amazon. Before we end this part of the part one of the show, just tell everybody where they can find out more about you, Steve, and about the book and all the resources. And we'll certainly do that at the end too, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, at One Stop Shop would be our website, topdoglearning.biz. We're old school that way. And there you can find out about the book, my team, all the cool stuff that we do. We're not just about queer stuff, of course. So check it out at topdoglearning.biz.
Fabulous. Thank you, Steve. We'll be back with you in one click. Remember, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. We're just one click away for part two with Dr. Steve.